Hey, good Tuesday, everybody, and welcome into the Volquest podcast. It is brought to you by Exterior Home Solutions. For a free estimate, 865-524-5888. Free estimate, 865-524-5888. Big thanks to Exterior Home Solutions, the title sponsor, presenting sponsor here at the Volquest podcast. Big week coming up. Whole lot of football. Spring practice set to conclude the final week here. They got practice later today. You got it on Thursday. And then, of course, they're going to have their Fast Friday before the Orange and White game coming up on Saturday. A big recruiting weekend in the rearview mirror. And then, of course, there'll be some guys here on campus throughout the week trying to take advantage of seeing spring practice up close and personal. So a big week coming up for Josh Heupel and his football program. And also, I just kind of want to start there before we really talk spring practice. You know, Friday and Saturday, Tennessee picked up 3 commits, 2 for the class of 2024, 1 for 2025 to get things started. It's a big weekend for Tennessee and in positions where, yeah, they might be project players here for these 2 tackles, but positions of importance because there's not a whole lot of tackles on the roster.
Yeah, there was no fasting on Friday this past week as far as recruiting. They ate big. Got a couple of commits on Friday, one in 2025. And then, of course, you look at the 2024 and Jesse Perry, a large human, a guy who's, still very raw. I think physicality-wise, Hubbard brings a lot to the table. And I think that goes back to him playing in a run-heavy offense. I mean, they basically almost run the single wing there at Middle Tennessee Christian. And, I think that, there's going to be parts of him that are going to be ahead of the game. And then there'll probably be some parts like pass pro where, he's a little bit behind. And so you just hope that he can pick up on it quickly. But the smart kid, and like I said, you can't teach size. And then, of course, on Saturday, offensive lineman from the state of Colorado. And, when you look at kind of what Tennessee's gotten done the last couple of days, it's hard not to get excited about, kind of where this class is right now because they're still in it with some heavy hitters. And I know some people on the board, another 3-star lineman. Guys, there's a lot of linemen that are 3 stars. Here's what you got to hope, though, Hubbard, is you can be a real player with Brandon Baker. You can find a way to be a deep player for Daniel Calhoun. You can find a way to, be in line for a couple of other big-time offensive linemen. And then you sprinkle in, these linemen around them, with Ginther and with Perry. And, Gage Ginther, I think, is going to be someone who continually rises up the rankings over the course of the next 7 or 8 months. He just seems like a Nathan Laycock to me, a guy that, the more people see him, the more people are around him, the more they like him, and the more he gets, bumped up and rated higher and higher.
Well, I think when you look at this, one on Ginther, I think they're going to have to continue to recruit him. I had a text from somebody right after he committed, said he was the best player in the state of Colorado, and that, everybody and people in the West are going to continue to come after him. So Tennessee, I think, is going to have to recruit that one pretty heavily. I do think his stock will rise. Here's the other thing, too. We talked about this a few weeks on the podcast. You need a healthy number of offensive linemen in this class.
Yep.
It's great to say you're going to go out and get 4 more Darnell Wrights. That's not realistic. You know what I mean? Nobody's sweeping that category in terms of landing, impact offensive linemen across the board. So what are you doing? You're building a base, and then you're going to swing hard for the big names that Austin just mentioned. What you don't want to do is only focus on swinging hard for those big names. And if you swing and miss, then you find yourself in late November in a teetotal scramble mode for some guys that are real reaches, okay, that are hardcore reaches. These are developmental guys, but most of the offensive line position is a developmental position. You don't play a ton of freshmen. If your program's in good shape, you don't want to have to play a ton of freshmen. No offense to all those guys that came in and had to play their first year. That's great that they survived and played. Darnell will tell you he survived his first year. He wasn't ready for college football. It was try to survive. Same for Wanye Morris. And you can go back through the years, Austin, of guys who just survived that first year.
Which is why, and I think you and Grant will agree, you have to go the high school route and develop, but you also, in today's modern world of kind of recruiting and that type of thing, you've got to go to the portal for offensive linemen. Like, I think that is That's a position where every year, it's kind of like every year you take a quarterback. I think every year you should be going to the portal for a veteran offensive lineman. Maybe it's a tackle, maybe it's a center, maybe it's a guard, whatever. But I think that the portal is your friend at that position more so than a lot of others. And it will be for Tennessee.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, you look at what they've done the past 2 off seasons. You went out and found a starting tackle last off season in Gerald Mincey, and sure, he split some time with J.J. Crawford and all that, but he played significant time last year. You go out and find a tackle and a guard this year, and John Campbell is probably going to play a whole lot of snaps for you, and Andre Carrick has an opportunity to win a starting position. So, Brant, yeah, I think the transfer portal is awesome. It's going to be a nice friend, but again, you can't only rely on the portal. You got to recruit, sign those guys, develop those guys, but also the portal's there to kind of help you bridge gaps or complete a starting 5.
Well, Grant, I mean, if your program is where it's supposed to be and where you're trying to get it to, the portal should be just a stopgap to fill a spot. Tyler Steen last year went to Alabama because Alabama had a singular need that they had on the offensive line for immediate help. That's where you want to get to if you're a football program. Tennessee's getting there. I don't know that they're completely there yet, but that's what you want your football program to be. And I do think you're always going to look at big men in the transfer portal on both sides of the line of scrimmage.
Here's my question. I'll put Austin on the spot since Austin talked about offensive line being friendly to the portal. What are the friendliest position groups to the portal, in your opinion, outside of just that offensive line? Like where should a good program's priorities be in terms of you're getting somebody out of the portal from this position group or these position groups that can help you?
I would go offensive line. I don't disagree that you could go on either side of the line with just big men, period. I would go quarterbacks. That's an area where, like, if you're a brand new coach and you've got to flip the script, you can flip it with a quarterback. It's kind of like a point guard in basketball or a big man in basketball. Those are fewer and far, I guess, few and more far between. When you think about, there's not a plethora of quarterbacks, but I think it's a friendly position. If you hit on the right guy, and then I would go secondary. I think that you can find some quality DBs. I think Tennessee found a quality DB in Gabe. I really like him. Some about his mental makeup, and I think he's athletic enough and just kind of smart football-wise.
Well, I think it's about need. I mean, you're talking about which are the more position-friendly guys. I mean, it's what are you looking for? Quarterback, there's always going to be good players in the portal because there's only one football, and that there's only one guy at that position. So I think there's always going to be a quality quarterback or 2 or 3 or 4 in the portal because it's a backup guy, Grant, who's tired of sitting, right? He wants to play. Then I think you look at, when you're looking for specific positions, I think you're going to look at group of 5 players who are looking to move up, who are looking for a bigger showcase, who maybe were under-recruited in high school, have become a better player, and they're playing in a program that's not in competition for a championship. That type of thing to fill your need along the way there. There's always going to be a plethora of running backs and wide receivers in the portal. I think there's always going to be that, but I think you have to screen through those very, very a lot because most schools play a lot of guys at those 2 positions. So why is a guy leaving? I think you got to really screen those 2 positions out really hard.
And not only need, but also context. Like Austin said, if you're a new coach and you're looking for that quarterback, it's probably a completely different way you're looking at the portal if you're an established head coach and you've got your roster somewhat where you want it in terms of numbers, in terms of competition at certain positions. So it's not only, I guess, just need, but also context in terms of who you got, how long you've been there, stuff like that.
Well, sure. I mean, look in the state of Alabama right now. Nick Saban is going to cherry pick at a position of need. Gus Malzahn basically said after the A game on Saturday, hey, we're open to anybody in the portal that we think can help us. Translation, I don't have enough good players as I make my transition into getting guys in who fit my system.
Who said that, Brett?
Not Gus Malzahn. Hugh Freeze. I'm sorry. They've run through
one of those Auburn coaches that wears.
They've run through about as many as Tennessee has through the last few years.
Barry Allen said it.
Hugh Freeze that said that. But But to your point, Grant, I mean, it is about context, and it is about where you were at in your program, right, Austin? I mean, Josh Heupel, year one, it was open season in the transfer portal. We just need bodies. Now they're looking in some specific areas. They needed a tackle. They went and got a tackle. They needed a corner, because they're bringing in a bunch of freshmen. They wanted a bridge guy there. They wanted a bridge guy at linebacker. They went and got two guys who are going to make impacts. So it's about where you're at in your program for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to hear what Bowden White has to say Saturday. What does he say?
Oh, come on, Austin. I drank some of Aunt B's magic elixir this morning, right?
You're not on a piano bench.
No,
Are you? Yeah. I can't tell. Are you? You got to spin
I knew
around.
it was a mistake to have those two on
Hey,
the same
however,
pod.
Kane doesn't even know who Bowden White is.
Former Auburn coach, right?
Oh, yeah.
Way back in the day.
Keep going, Kane.
You look at this class of 24, Austin, and of course you bring in two tackle bodies, and we'll get to the 25 commit here in just a second. But again, it's a top 10 class right now, right? It's seventh in the nation for the national rankings per on three. But you've got positions that are kind of your cornerstones of the class. You have your quarterback, right? You have some highly rated 4-star prospects at key positions like tight end for this offense, cornerback. You have an impact at receiver. And then you have some other guys that you sprinkle in there that you think can really help you. As far as the start for the class of 2024, in terms of those pillars, looks like Tennessee's doing a pretty decent job.
Yeah, doing a decent job. And again, they're in play with some big-time guys. They just got to land their share. They can't whiff. Nobody expects them to land them all. And so, do they find another tight end to go with Jonathan Eccles? Do they, find a big-time offensive lineman, as we talked about earlier? Do they find another big-time receiver, whether it be Mike Matthews or Ryan Wingo, to go with J.J. Harrell? Where's Amari Jefferson play? Defensively, what do they, do they land Boo Carter like most expect? Do they continue to hit home runs in the state of Tennessee, which means landing who you want? It's not about, who you missed. It's, did you land everyone you wanted? A year ago, I would argue that Tennessee landed anybody they wanted in the state of Tennessee. 2 years ago, not so much. And the difference being is the NCAA investigation, the cloud over it, that all of a sudden Tennessee is able to show who they are, have some success, and they start getting traction. This year, to this point, they landed whoever they want to land. Now, they've still got some they want to land that have not gotten in, that, are dragging this out because they want to, go through the recruiting process. They want to take their visits. And, Tennessee's going to have to be patient on a few of those. Edmund Spillman, Boo Carter, Ronan O'Connell, Amari Jefferson, all guys that Tennessee covets deeply. But they can all land them either or two. So, like, you look at it and you go, when was the last time Tennessee could, like, literally look and go, they got everybody they wanted. They didn't really miss on anybody.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute for sure. And maybe Tennessee's kind of approaching that area once again. 2025, as you said in the video, hey, it's a couple years away, but recruiting, it's never too early. Shamar Arnaud, one of the highly rated 4-star prospects in that class. He's a top 200 player nationally. Why did he choose Tennessee this early and go ahead and say, hey, I'm done?
I just felt like the time, to get it done was now. And, he and his dad, just felt like Tennessee was the right fit. He came in last week and, thinking that was going to be the right move. And that just solidified it, or what was really 2 weekends ago now, as we, or a week and a half past that. So, nice get for Willie Martinez, a really nice key piece. You'll have to keep recruiting that one. There's going to be a lot of big-time schools come after Shamar over the next few years. But he really likes Tennessee a lot, and to get him in the boat, you probably feel a little safer with that one than you did Tony Mitchell when he committed as an 8th grader, knowing he was never going to end up here out of the state of Alabama. Shamar just moved to Milton, knows some people at Tennessee or with Tennessee ties. So, again, not going to be easy. Still going to have to recruit him. But the path to keep this one long-term, I think, is definitely there.
Tennessee recruiting is in full swing, and it's been really busy here in the month of March and early part of April with Tennessee football spring practice going on. Well, there's only one more week left of that. The orange and white game is coming up on Saturday, and we're going to discuss what we've learned from spring practice so far and who are some of those players that have stood out to us and who are some of those players that need a good last week. Coming up next here on the Volquest Podcast. But every single Tuesday and Thursday, it's the Volquest Podcast presented by our friends over at Exterior Home Solutions.
Stressful. That's why it's important to find someone who offers efficient, quality work with financing options. Exterior Home Solutions, they value not only family, but community. And they're who I call when life happens, and you should too.
That's called a jump
practice.
cut, baby. I wear the same quarter zip.
Son, you're wearing the same quarter zip. It's almost
Actually,
like you're wearing a
I've
hoodie.
only got a million of them over there.
Spring practice last week, here this week for Tennessee football, practicing today on a Tuesday. Thursday, they'll have their Fast Friday. And then the orange and white game is coming up on
Why
Saturday.
do they not eat on Friday?
So what?
Why do they not eat on Friday?
I don't know.
Fast
I eat every Friday.
Hub's got it. No, Hub's the only one that gets it.
I got it. Keep rolling.
Who were some of the guys, Brent, we'll start with you. We'll let Austin settle down for a minute. Who were some of the guys who, so far through, 3 weeks or whatever, however long it's been, who were some of the guys who have made their case to, move up the depth chart, who have really shown out and done a really nice job here in spring? And maybe that doesn't translate into snaps in the fall, but, guys Tennessee feels good about after this last 3 weeks or so.
Well, I mean, I think the transfers have done a nice job when you talk about Judy Lawley and the secondary. And I think even though he didn't scrimmage on Thursday, I think Keenan Peely has certainly shown that he's going to be able to help them and play at the linebacker position. That adjustment has gone well. I think Ramel Keaton continues to say, hey, don't forget about me, while everybody else is talking about other players. Ramel just kind of keeps, making some plays out there for Tennessee. Not a superstar, but a guy you're going to be able to count on. And a guy who made a lot of key plays last year. I think he's playing with more confidence than he's probably ever played with.
The Ramel Keaton play that will forever stand out in my mind, not only the diving catch against Florida, but the way he just got up and just signaled first down. Like it was like, 2nd and 4, and he caught a 5-yard pass. But I think, what was it, Kelsey Pope early last week, just talking about the veteran presence of Ramel Keaton and how, some young guys can get excited, or some young guys can, kind of get lost in the moment and, not really know what they're doing out there. And to have a veteran like Ramel Keaton, who's never really too high, never really too low, I think that's a guy that just the steadiness there is kind of underrated and not talked about enough. I don't know. That's when I look at Ramel Keaton, it's just that veteran presence and that kind of even keel that I think a lot of position groups need.
And I think he's more confident, Hubbard, because the guy pulling the trigger is somebody he's very comfortable with, and that's Joe Milton. I think it wouldn't matter who the quarterback is. I mean, he had success with Hendon too, but I think there's a connection there between Milton and Ramel that it's kind of like there was for Hendon Hooker and Cedric Tillman. Like I think there was kind of an unspoken, like, I got your back, I know you got my back. When things get tough, look my way. And
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, and I think that helps the confidence.
Yeah, I think he's just crafty. He's a guy who knows how to get open. Joe knows exactly where the route's going to be, where he wants the ball, how he's going to get open in a route. And he did a solid job making some guys miss on a few plays last year. He's never going to go for 250 and 5 touchdowns or anything like that, but he's going to be a really nice move the chains kind of guy and a guy that you're comfortable with in critical situations, because he's been really good in those types of plays. When the game's on the line or a possession's on the line, he's been good in those spots. Eric, you were asking about other players. I'll tell you a young player who I think is having a solid spring, and he's being almost forced to have a solid spring, and that's Addison Nichols. I think Tennessee is really, really trying to build the depth there on the offensive line, and I think he's a guy, Austin, it feels like they're forcing, right? I mean, they hold Cooper Mays out of the scrimmage in part so Addison Nichols can get all the reps that he can at center, and I think Addison's going to factor into the guard competition when we get to fall camp. This has been a kind of we're gonna get you ready. You just hang on, because you're going to get all the reps you can handle this spring, and I think he's ultimately going to benefit from that, Austin.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they first wanted to get him to lock him in as kind of Cooper's number 2, and then after that, and when he gets to fall camp, if you're Ollie Lane, Jackson Lampley, Andre Carrick, it's another body you're going to have to fend off. for that left guard spot, because I do think that he'll be, put in a position there to see what he can do. And, again, Tennessee's going to have options at left guard. The question is kind of who can be consistent, and then who can give them the most, comfort level there. And who's Cooper want in between he and likely John Campbell?
Grant, I want to get your thoughts on some guys who you've been impressed with so far, but kind of on that note, left guard, you brought up Addison Nichols, who has done a nice job, probably being Cooper's number 2, could factor in at left guard. But Brant, kind of where are we at left guard right now? I mean, it's very much unsettled. There's not going to be a starter coming out of spring practice, but with the Ollie Lanes, with the Andre Kerrigs, the new guy, with the Jackson Lampleys, kind of where are we in spring practice at the left guard spot?
Got 4 guys going to probably leave spring as guys that are competing for the job. And I think that, one of the topics, Grant, that we're going to be asking Josh Heupel and Joey Halsley and Glenn Ellerby about early in fall camp is, when do you need to settle in on 5 for continuity, right? I mean, it's an annual question, isn't it, Grant? Like when are you, now last year, maybe not so much because they were pretty settled across the board, but it seems like most every year you're asking the question, when do you need to settle in on your 5 for continuity? That's going to be the question of fall camp for this offense.
See, here's the problem with spring football. We see football and we talk about football and we ask coaches football questions, but you never really get any concrete answers in spring, right? Who's ever won a job in spring football? So whatever, because nothing really gets
right.
The issue's never forced, because we're not going to see a full practice. We're not really even going to see anything in the orange and white game that resembles a 11 on 11, good on good, whatever, that stuff that we maybe saw years past in spring games. So you just take all these questions that we have to fall camp right now, like the offensive line, like those offensive line competitions that you're talking about. Eric, do you ask me for a name? Somebody that's been impressed? Dylan Sampson, because it feels like he's kind of the old guy on the field right now for those running backs, and he's only been here for a year.
Yeah.
Because Jabari Small's sidelined, and what's Jalen Wright doing? And he's got Cam Sutton and Deshaun Bishop behind him. So suddenly, what the difference a year makes, suddenly it feels like he's kind of, because I don't think he didn't have anything to prove to me based on some of the stuff we saw and heard about him during his freshman season. But now it seems like he's kind of that veteran for a minute, not in the meeting room or anything like that where all those guys are. But in terms of guys getting reps and having to do stuff in practice, I would throw Dylan's name out there.
Yeah, and to add on to what Grant just said, I think that's why Jabari Small's got to have his head on a swivel come fall camp, because he's going to have to be really good. I mean, I think he'll kind of get plugged back into that role he's been in along with Jalen Wright, but Dylan Sampson's had such a productive spring, and the young guys behind him, but I don't really think about them as much as I do Dylan Sampson. If I'm Jabari Small, that's the guy I'm worried about taking some of my reps. And, a year ago, it was the pass protection. You go back to that LSU game where he got Hendon obliterated. That kind of, kept him off there for a little while. He started to get a little more run late in the year. But now I don't think that's an issue anymore. And I think that's where, to Grant's point, this kind of spring can really springboard him into more reps in the fall. And likely whose reps are they going to be? Probably going to be Jabari Smalls to a degree.
Well, and what a luxury Tennessee's at right now, Eric, and everybody, where they're in a situation where they can basically bubble wrap somebody for spring practice.
Yeah.
And put them on the shelf.
That's how we did when we put you up on that roof for that exterior home solution.
I mean, it's been it's been a long time since Tennessee has said, "Hey, let's just hold." I mean, they held 2 linebackers on Thursday who could have scrimmaged, and basically it gives Arian Carter and it gives Jeremiah Telander and it gives Elijah Herring and Caleb Perry all the opportunities to do that. I mean, 2 years ago, they didn't have anybody, or 2 years ago, they didn't have anybody to line up at that linebacker's position, and everybody's trying to learn a defense that they didn't know. Now you've got continuity, Grant. Now you've got some depth. You've got 20 newcomers, and really the spring has turned a lot into all about those newcomers, getting them as many reps as they can get. That doesn't mean guys aren't working individually to get better, but don't get a guy hurt and give all those young guys as many reps as you can to build depth, particularly in scrimmage situations.
And how long has it been since it's been like that? I mean,
long time.
Number of years. I mean, even under Jeremy, was there springs where they had enough guys to just, like you said, basically put your veterans on the sideline and see what you can do?
Yeah, he was
from
putting
these
in a
young
new offense every year. I mean, so you had to play your starters in spring because they were learning the new system. Basically every year he was a coach here. Because you went, the first year it was learn what Tyson Helton does, and then he's out, and it's learn what Jim Chaney does, and then obviously we're at the finish line at that point. But you go back and look, Derek Dooley had the same situation, right? Out as your defensive coordinator. You got it 1 year, you got a brand new defense you're putting in. Part of this is not just improved depth, and having some veterans come back, but you're doing the same thing for multiple years. And that just hasn't happened enough in Tennessee's program. So you had to play your veterans. Your quarterback, Austin, had to get all the reps because he learned a new offense. Now that's not the case here.
Well, and even if the coordinator didn't change a ton, the position coach has changed too frequent. And it's a different voice delivering the message and the way he coaches and the way he, platoons his players, there's been so much change. I'll continue to beat the drum of. Tennessee when Phillip was fired in 2008, from Dan Brooks, the next 6 years, Tennessee had a different defensive line coach every year. 6 straight years, or what they call a COVID senior now.
Hey,
I feel like we should we knock on wood or something like.
How many strength coaches were their hubs? This guy, the new strength coach, this Kerr guy, nobody knows him, and I think it's the best thing going because nobody's sitting there analyzing,
Yeah. Grant, to your point, knock on wood, knock on your head, and again, it's a huge reason why Tennessee has put themselves in a position to be talked about the way that they are, and it's given them the ability to focus on a bunch of young players because guys aren't having to worry about how something's blocked up, right? Guys not have. It's just a different. It's fun. It's different, and it's a good thing for Tennessee fans out there because it gives you a chance to really grow and develop.
The continuity benefits us the most. Let's not get that twisted. The people trying to cover the team are the ones that benefit most. Good for the football program, but it's our sanity we're worried about here.
Yeah, selfishly, right? Absolutely,
yes,
right, AP?
Very.
Yeah, yes and no. Grant's right; it does help, but at the same time, once you've made relationships with 1 or 3 or 5 or 12, another one doesn't really ever enter my mind. So it's like, I kind of go in. I tell every coach going in when I meet them, I'll be here long after you're gone. And that's kind of the truth. That's how it works.
But it has been selfishly, it has been nice not having to try to get to know and try to build trust with a bunch of new people each and every year the last couple of years. So selfish.
I was going to say a couple more practices left.
Selfishly is the morning practices. That's
the best. Even when I was doing morning radio, it was the absolute best because it allows you to do 2 jobs at once. And
you did morning radio.
When I was doing morning radio, it was still the best. And if I ever have kids one day and they go back to afternoon practices, that's going to be the absolute worst. So it's been great.
Which part's going to be the worst, having kids or having afternoon practice?
I haven't decided yet.
Answer carefully. Marissa's watching.
Both give me some tears.
Yeah, answer carefully after spending the weekend at a 1-year-old's birthday party.
I know. Yeah, now that's scared. You ever talk about birth control? Going to a 1-year-old's birthday party? Good God.
Birth control is like going to a 3 or 4-year-old's birthday party. A 1-year-old barely can walk, and it's just smashing a cake.
But all the other Rugrats that were there, it was
then
crazy,
you're not talking about 1-year-olds.
A couple more practices left. The secondary is obviously a position group that has a whole lot of questions. Willie Martinez said last week, hey, there's no 1s, there's no 2s, there's no 3s. He's been mixing and matching those groups, even in the scrimmages. Obviously, you like Gabe Judy Lawley, what he's brought so far this spring. I think we can all agree that Danico Slaughter is looked pretty good when we've been out there at practice. Heard some good things about some of those freshman corners. But what about that safety spot? Okay, you got McCullough, you got Wesley Walker, Andre Turrentine. You've got Jordan Thomas, who's a little bit of safety, obviously doing some star as well. Christian Charles is back in that mix. Brent, where are we at safety right now entering the orange and white game?
Hodgepodge. Got a bunch of puzzle pieces. Not sure where everybody's going to fit. I mean, I don't want
Has there been any clarity this spring?
No. I mean, Wesley Walker's going to play. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that, he's got experience and he's going to factor in. We'll see what happens with the other side with Jalen McCullough, and we'll see how much they rotate. We'll see where Christian Charles is. He's got to stay healthy if he's going to have a chance to be a factor in at the safety position. I think Turrentine's got to get much more focused. I don't think he's made a move this spring. I don't think he's capitalized on whatever opportunities the way he should have or the way he needed to. I'm not saying he can't play or he's not going to factor in, but I think he's got to be a little more dialed in than what he's been. I like Jordan Thomas. And we'll see. I mean, what's interesting about the secondary when you look at it, you talk about all these puzzle pieces, but really, I mean, I think we'll all agree Danico Slaughter is going to play one corner position. Tamarian McDonald's back at the nickel spot. I think he's going to hold down the nickel spot. You think you got Gabe Judy Lawley on the other side, who's started a bunch of games. He would make the most sense at the other corner. And then you got Wesley Walker. You're suddenly a pretty experienced secondary when you think about it. Now, you got a bunch of newcomers, and we'll see who the other safety is. I mean, McCullough's got more experience than Austin's got on golf courses in Knoxville the last 20 years. And we'll see where they are. But suddenly, Grant, you're a little more experienced than maybe people think you're going to be in the secondary. Now, maybe they all haven't played here, but when you look at it, I mean, Danico Slaughter is probably the least experienced, and he's the guy with the starts that's got the most momentum at the corner position.
Now, who's been here 20 years, though? Are you talking about Austin or are you talking about McCullough in terms of this golf course experience?
It's a close race. I think Austin's got him by a couple of years. But
his point is I don't play a lot of golf in Knoxville.
Actually, that was my first thought. I said, why are you limiting this to Knoxville? This is not where Austin Price's golf course focus is.
Just say Austin Price golf courses, because then there's no comparison in that analogy, because Austin's playing all over the world and doing all of his golf stuff. So that didn't work. So I did limit it to the Knoxville courses where he doesn't play. The point being, Jalen McCullough's got a lot of experience. Wesley Walker's got a ton of experience going back to his Georgia Tech days. I mean, Judy Lawley played at Vanderbilt. He played at BYU. He's got a lot of experience. And Danico Slaughter had as much momentum as anybody at the position when the regular season ended or the bowl game ended.
I mean, yeah, it sounds good when you lay it out like that, and you mention all that experience and what Austin talked about Gabe earlier, and I agree that Danico might be the least experienced, but maybe the most exciting or intriguing in terms of you want to see him and you want to see what he can do. Eric, you grabbed the Roku remote. Are you about to turn us off, or are we good?
No, you're good for now. You're walking.
I mean, yeah.
I
wasn't sure if that was a remote or not.
There it is. I mean, it's spring football. Like those defensive back questions, they're just going to pick right back up and fall. But I do think, off the five on the offensive line that Brent talked about earlier, which five are you going to, at what point do you cut those down? And then defensive backs, there's a lot of experience there. There's a lot of names, but can they be more productive when they pick back up in the fall because of how much, that question had to be answered, last fall.
And again, you go not just those guys that you just laid out right there, and that's kind of the thing I was going to say, Grant. Like, you look behind those guys, and in camp right now, you've got Warren Burrell, who's been a multi-year starter, who is limited a little bit, but he's there. Kamal Haddon is still there. You got Brandon Turnage, who did a lot of good things, just can never stay healthy or stay consistent. He's there. I mean, again, you've got guys who, in the grand scheme of things, they've got to find a way to be consistent because they weren't last year, but you still have a whole lot of experience even behind those guys, Brent, that you just didn't have a couple years ago.
Yeah, but guess what's coming on April 15th? The old
portal window.
Yep.
My wife's birthday?
No,
game?
The portal window is opening up, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Is there movement? Does that change what your depth looks like? Because you can, Austin, suddenly right out there, hey, you got 8 guys who have played a lot of football. Are all those guys going to stay and be a part? We'll see. Will this be a big portal season in college football, or will there be minimal numbers of guys who go in the portal post-spring? What is there, 17 spring games on Saturday? Yeah. Something like that? So everybody's winding it up. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I can't imagine that somebody in that secondary doesn't go in. I mean, when you start laying them all out, and Hubbs does present a great case for those what the lineup he presented, right? Great case. But then all of a sudden you talk about Burrell and Haddon and Turnage and Christian Charles and all these guys, and you're just like somebody's leaving. Like somebody's not going to sit here and go through all this to not play and waste eligibility. But hey, I say the same thing about the Georgia quarterback position, and I'm not sure any of those guys are going to leave, and I think they may just stick it out for fall after all.
And when that happens, you have 2-3 young cornerbacks that you really, really like that have gotten here a semester early and gotten in the role of things and had done some good things. So that's college football for you. Big week coming up, Tennessee football, orange and white game on Saturday, and Volquest will have all that coverage there. Before we call it quits here today, Grant, any updates on Tennessee basketball, transfer portal, seniors with decisions to make? What's kind of the update here early in the week?
Speaking of my sanity, no, there's no update. As far as I know, we're recording this on a Monday morning. As of Sunday, there was no, as of, going in Friday 2 weeks ago, they were looking for an answer from Santiago Vespi. They didn't have one. This past Friday, they were hoping to get an answer from Santiago Vespi. They didn't have one. I think you won't have an answer from Josiah until he goes through the process and sees what kind of feedback he gets and what the next step might be for him. They need to know, like we've been saying repeatedly, they got to know something yesterday, basically, because you're trying to build a roster, and everybody's been working in the portal for the last month now. But Tennessee's working in the portal too. They'll have Chris Ledlam here, the Harvard forward, for the weekend. They're trying to get Caleb Mills here for the Florida State transfer for the weekend, but that was kind of one of those things where they went into this past weekend knowing that he was going to be at Memphis, and it might be hard to get him out of that Memphis visit, and he ends up committing to Memphis. There's a guard at North Texas, Tyler Perry, that they're after, very productive Conference USA Player of the Year, a guy that led North Texas to the NIT title, a junior college guy. There's a kid at Northern Colorado, Dalton Connect, I think his name is. I don't know how to say it. But he averaged 20 and 7, really good pick and roll, kind of wing guy. He's a guy that would be a highly sought after guy. There's a guy at Iowa State, Caleb Grill, that they're kind of talking to and trying to figure out what Santi's going to do and what kind of need they're going to have a guard. And then you got to watch portals for, guys like BJ Edwards and kind of the guys that you're worried about and trying to figure out what they're going to do from Tennessee's side of it. There's a bunch of stuff about Julian Phillips and the portal and Auburn. And last I checked, what I know, Tennessee staff would be surprised if he entered the portal. I don't know how there's a big Auburn connection there if he's not already in the portal, how stuff like that's, kind of shaken out. But really, there's nothing from Santi. There's not going to be anything from Joe for a while. Olivier's not going to play college basketball next year, as far as I know. I think he's going pro. Roche won't be back. So you're waiting to see what Julian does. You're waiting to see what Santi does. And you're trying to get these guys on a visit. They've got a Zoom meeting with the Northern Colorado kid, Dalton Connect, on Tuesday, and they're trying to get Tyler Perry on campus. So we'll see what happens there. So there's a few names that they're juggling, and then they're trying to wait and get some feedback.
I know we're about out of time here, Eric, but both for Austin and Grant, maybe I'm wrong here. Feels like basketball portal is different than football portal. From the standpoint, a lot of these guys are committing quick without doing a whole lot of visit stuff. The football thing has kind of turned in taking another 5 official visits or 3 official visits, 4
baby
5 days, whatever. It doesn't feel like that way in basketball. Am I wrong? And if I'm not wrong, why do you think that's the case? Either one of you guys or both of you jump in there.
It felt like last year, Grant, that some guys, Chris Hunter came and took visits. It felt like people took visits a year ago. Maybe it wasn't 5, but I do think that, Hubs has got the kind of right notion. It does feel different. I don't know if it's that drastic to where maybe you're looking at the kid that committed to Memphis as more of a standalone, but it definitely feels different.
Yeah, and I think honestly, high school recruiting as well, football and basketball kids just seem to be wired differently, and they seem to handle the recruiting process differently. And I think that translates to handling the portal process. It does feel like in college basketball, a lot of times there's a program that everybody's kind of looking at when a kid does enter the portal. Like, if he enters the portal, look out for this school. I don't know if that's the case with football as much as it is with basketball, but no, it doesn't feel like there's the 5 visits, so we'll see what happens. Now, Chris Ledlam, the kid from Harvard, he's been on an Indiana visit, and he's had St. John's on his radar at Michigan State, and he's taken his time with this process, and he stretched it out because Tennessee was in Boston to see him the day after the Florida Atlantic loss. So it's been a little bit on him, but I think for the most part, yeah, it doesn't feel like they're going to take those 5 visits and they're going to stretch it out and they're going to make it a big process. It just feels like they kind of know what's going to happen or who might be on their radar once they enter the portal. But I think that also kind of feels like how kind of high school kids do it, where it's not I don't know, it just seems a lot different in high school basketball recruiting opposed to football, just in terms of how they're wired and how they handle the process. It just seems like 2 very different groups of athletes.
Well, and let's face it too, and I know we're up against it. Let's face it too. The AAU coach, the handler game has always been a lot stronger in basketball. So you could potentially be seeing a lot of that going on right now. Even on Tennessee's team, I think there are players that have people around them that are pushing them to leave, and we'll see if they do, or we'll see if they stay. Like a guy like Jonas Adu. I don't think that that's some lock that he's back. We'll see if he is. But I think it's definitely something you have to, if you're a Tennessee fan, you understand that your team year to year in basketball especially could look drastically different.
So what I've told people, it's like NBA free agency, except there's no contracts. Everybody's on a 1-year deal. You finish your season, and if you played a bigger piece of the puzzle on the floor, you're going to want a bigger piece off the floor, and you're going to want some NIL money. And you can basically leverage your way into saying, I want some NIL money, or I'm going to enter the portal. I mean, you can threaten that, or you can just enter the portal. But every year, it's going to feel like free agency. And when you only have 13 scholarships, it's not hard to turn over that roster every year and for it to be crazy. I think it'll settle down at some point a little bit, or maybe become more normal, and we'll get used to what's going on here. But right now, it seems like it just gets crazier every year.
As we say goodbye here, I do have one more question for Grant. Grant, are you excited about Eastern Kentucky coming up?
I am excited. Sorry, Eric. My bad. Didn't mean to slide into the Lindsey Nelson press box. And
the Eric K. Memorial seats. I'm not allowed back in, am I?
Right behind that post, you can't see anything anyway, so what's it matter?
If you went off the views for the Craven Wings extra innings, you would not be allowed back.
Well,
thank you.
I think a win and a loss has something to do with that as well. But yes, you are correct. Grant, appreciate you filling in. Tennessee avoided the sweep, and again, the slate does not get any easier on the road to another top 10 showdown at Arkansas here coming up this weekend. Orange and white game on Saturday, and we'll be back for the Mailbag podcast coming up on Thursday. For Austin Price, Grant Ramey, Brent Hubbs, I am Eric Kane. A big shout out, as always, to our presenting sponsor of the podcast. That is Exterior Home Solutions, 865-524-5888, 865-524-5888. Give them a call today for a free estimate. Appreciate you guys. We'll be back on Thursday here on the Volquest podcast.